What's up, Mecha fans, and welcome back to the channel. So today we are once again going back to last year, being 2024, and we're going to be talking about every single Mecha anime series that released in that year and ranking them all from worst to best. Before I dive into my ranking of these though, make sure to head on down to the comment section below, let me know your ranking of them from worst to best. And while you're there, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you're a fan of Mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Coming in last place at number 5 is Grendizer U. Now this series I feel like has been doomed in many ways because it just did not air properly, and luckily I did manage to find a way to watch it, but it was never going to reach an audience if it was never broadcast properly on streaming services or anything like that, so I highly doubt this thing's getting a season 2 for that very reason, but I just was not a fan of this. I wanted to like it, I was hoping that it would be decent enough, but then it just delivered something that never really engaged me. Now, everything else I'm going to talk about on this list, even if I am fairly negative on some of them, there's still great things within there. There's still certain elements where I think, yeah, that's really good. Or there's an episode that's like really fantastic. Grendizer U for me never had any of that. And the story itself seems to like lack urgency and lack, forward movement or anything like that. Because everything's almost like in a stalemate where you'd have, the enemies come down and attack, but you'd never go up to the enemies to attack them, even though in many circumstances you probably could. So there's just really weird writing decisions that almost like force the series to be longer than it should realistically be. And the only thing I can really give it props for is the fact that it manages to bring back a franchise that hasn't really been around for almost 50 years, maintain that kind of classic essence that series has, but then also modernize it enough to actually feel like a 2024 series, but whilst at the same time very much feeling like something old school and classic. I can give it props for that, but as a series, like in its entirety, I didn't really like this one if I'm being honest. At number 4 we have Code Geass Roze of the Recapture, and in many ways this one breaks my heart a little bit because the original Code Geass series is absolutely phenomenal, and I watched that for the first time before this series. So I went in with the expectations of, right, this is like a sequel to that, it's part of a franchise where naturally, because the original series is so beloved and so incredible in its own right, there's a certain expectation or level of expectation that you have going into something new to come out of something with that exact same name code to it. And Roze the Recapture started off really strong. First episode in particular, I would say the first episode, like the premiere is fantastic, but I'd definitely say the first 2 episodes I thought were really, really strong. And then you kind of go into 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's alright, but it's not amazing. You have a fantastic episode 7 where we dive into the backstory of Ash, and it's probably one of, if not my favourite episodes of anime of 2024, but it's certainly my favourite episode of this series. And then after that, has good moments, but again, like it's a very rushed finale. And this is one of those series where, as I've sat with it, I have liked it that much less, because there's only really 2 characters I truly cared about, one of which I really cared about, and that's Ash, but then you have Sakia as well, who I think is a pretty solid protagonist. Other than that though, like a very unmemorable supporting cast that in many ways just feels like a copy-paste of a lot of characters that you have in the original series. So it's kind of going out of its way to not be original, but then the kind of new elements and original elements that it implements in aren't all that effective. It's a series that I really wish that I loved more than I did, and it's a real shame that this one didn't manage to stick the landing in the end, and I think a couple of years' time, I may look back on this one as something that's quite bad. Moving into our top 3, we have Gundam Requiem for Vengeance. Now, it's debatable whether or not this is actually an anime series, but it's from Gundam, which is the biggest mecha anime franchise, so it only makes sense to include it on this list. But this series has its really good moments, and it has a lot that it doesn't do so well. Story-wise, I think it's a compelling enough story. I don't think it manages to stick the landing with the ending, and the animation was certainly a choice, especially with the human characters. But when it comes to the mobile suit action and the actual designs of the mobile suits, absolutely phenomenal stuff. The voice acting is actually pretty good in this series as well, so it just delivers a lot that's really cool, but then kind of has its downsides as well. So it's one of those series that very much sits in the middle, but I also think it's better than a lot of people give it credit for. But I could see within 5 years down the line, this could well be looked upon as not necessarily the best of Gundam, but it could be looked upon in a more respectful way, where people look back at it and think, that was a good experiment, but it's also a pretty good series and story in its own right. And that's kind of how I see this series, is that it is an experiment, and I think in terms of a first time doing something, they did a good job. Obviously, there's things that need to be improved upon, but generally, it's a pretty solid series that, for a first time doing, Unreal Engine Gundam, I think it paid off, and I wouldn't mind seeing something similar, with improvements of course, somewhere in the future. Our runner-up in second place is Synduality Noir Part 2, and this sits in the opposite category of Roze the Recapture, because that series, as I thought more about it, I liked it less. Synduality Noir, I like it more as I think about it more. Not that it necessarily gets better as a series, but I just like the experience it delivers. The fact that it's trying to be a setup for a franchise where most of the time that would not work, I think it very much works in the favour of synduality noir, because it sets up a world that you're invested in. It's all pre-established, but it explores that in a way that feels unique. It feels like a unique mecha series, and I feel like if you wanted to set up a franchise in a genre that's very much established itself with the likes of Gundam, Macross, Mazinger, all the super robot stuff, for the most part, it's difficult to find a unique angle there. But setting itself in like a post-apocalyptic world that has so much rich history about how the world fell, and even, like kind of the world going underground and then that city falling, and there's so much that's established in this series that's explored well enough to give context to the story and make you care about the world and everything that's happened, but there's so much left out where there's so much potential to explore that in either another anime series, in a video game like they've just made with Echo of Ada, or a movie, whatever they want to do. There's so much lore established that can really be tapped into by creatives. And as someone who, kind of likes creating stories within worlds that are pre-established, like I always like to think about how would I make a Star Wars movie or a Star Wars series or something along those lines. Having a world that is set up like this excites me, like creatively, just thinking about that and just thinking about, okay, how could I make a story within this world? So whenever a franchise kind of establishes a world or a universe where there's potential there for you to creatively inject your own ideas, that just really excites me. But the series in and of itself, I think, delivers a really good story. It feels self-contained. It doesn't feel like it's burdened down by a massive world. It feels like it tells its story really well, really concisely, with a nice group of characters that are all established pretty well. And, I'm not going to say every character is phenomenal, but there's a large amount of characters in this series that I cared for. Character designs are great. The actual designs of the mechs, I think, are really cool as well. Obviously, vastly different to something like Gundam or Mazinger, but they're still, in their own right, obviously, mechs, and they just kind of adds so much. Like, it adds a different angle to the mecha genre, which I really, really liked and appreciated. So this is one where not a lot of people talk about it. I can understand if this franchise barely gets revisited again in the future after this and Echo of Ada, but I would like to see more from it because I'm invested in this world, and I think as you go along, if you advertise it a lot better, people will be interested in this. And this series, like I said, in and of itself, I think is really good. But coming in first place, we have Brave Bang Braven. This was an event for sure. This was one of those series that kind of came out of nowhere in the early part of the year. I never watched it as and when it came out, but one thing I thoroughly do appreciate about it is that it's essentially a bait and switch. It set itself up as a real robot series, and then the end of the first episode basically turns it into like super robot parody that's poking fun in itself, but just is so funny. And like the first half of this series, or first 8 episodes I want to say, so really the first 2/3 of the series, are downright hilarious. Probably the best mecha anime stuff I'd seen all year, and some of the most unique stuff I'd seen in the genre for a while. Probably one of the funniest anime series I'd also seen in a while. Like, this thing was fantastic for the first 8 episodes. It makes a certain decision, which I still don't agree with, but it also doesn't derail the series, because it still has plenty more to offer. And I think that idea, because I didn't see it coming and because it feels like such a good twist, I do like it a little bit more. And I think this is one of those series where, again, like with synduality noir, as I sit more with it, I could like it more, but I could also like it less. It all depends on how my mind kind of wraps around that twist, and upon like further inspection and maybe upon a rewatch, how do I actually feel about that twist? Because the twist is the real thing that could potentially change an opinion. For a lot of people, I know it may have derailed the series, and for a lot of people, it may have made them like the series even more. For me, I sit very much in the middle where I don't love the twist. I don't know whether I even really like the twist, but it doesn't derail the series, and I still had so much fun with it. And beyond that, it delivers exciting action. But I think the thing that's really at its core is the comedy, and because the comedy works so well with the characters, and it establishes a pretty respectable group of characters and ones that are pretty engaging, I loved this series. It was such a blast to watch, and sometimes, just having something that in the moment is such a great watch and you're having so much fun with, that's enough. And it's definitely enough to put it in my number one spot, which I gotta be honest, 2024 in terms of Mecha anime series was not the strongest year ever, but I think Brave Band Bravern certainly stands out as the unique example of one that truly stood above them all in and of its concept, execution, and it just delivered something wholly unique and something that really stood out as the best Mecha anime series of 2024. There we have it though, that is my ranking of every single Mecha anime series released in 2024. Before I get out of here, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of Mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. Also, head on down to the comment section below, let me know your ranking of these series, all the ones that you did end up watching out of those 5, and keep an eye out because I will have my tier list ranking of all the first time watch Mecha animes of 2024. That can range from films, OVAs, series, anything that was released before 2024 that's a Mecha anime, things like Gundam Seed, which I watched, the Pat Labor movies. Stay tuned for that video because it's going to be coming very soon. Thank you once again for tuning into Mecha Chat today. I'll see you guys next time.